So what we need to do is we need to be ready for all three. We need to be ready for the duck events. We need to learn to be able to duck, if you'll excuse the pun. We need to be able to be ready for the white swan events when they come along. And then for the black swan events, we just need to cultivate and build a bit of cognitive flexibility. We sell ourselves stories to explain away why we're hesitating, why we're procrastinating, why we're avoiding that particular behavior. So we say, oh, well, the reason why I couldn't do it is because of this, and we find an excuse. So to me, the most important mindset we can get those people who are struggling with situations to be able to adopt is to sell themselves a story that they can be the hero. And the only thing
Yeah.
that's a differentiator between the hero and a villain or victim is control, focusing on what you can do, what you can influence.
Be Your Brand Podcast, suggerimenti e strategie per il vostro mindset e il vostro personal brand. Chi vi parla è Loris Bianchini. Welcome to this episode of Be Your Brand Podcast. Today is a great day because we have a great guest with us, and I am thrilled and honored to host today a great thought leader and speaker and trainer, psychologist, or whatever. Let me introduce you, Owen Fitzpatrick. Hi, Owen. Welcome to Be Your Brand Podcast.
Thank you very much, Loris. It's great to be here, my friend, and delighted to have the chance to share with your listeners and viewers, hopefully some insights that can help.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you very much. Let me introduce you a little bit more in detail because you have done really a lot of stuff, a lot of great things. So I want to share with the audience today just a little bit of your background. So you are an international speaker and trainer and a best-selling author and a social psychologist. And you spoke to audiences in more than 30 countries. You are also a writer, so you authored 9 books and that are translated into more than 20 languages. And you won also an international award in filmmaking and acting. Let me talk about our first meeting. I met you in Milan more than 7 years ago during one training that you were giving in Milan at that time. And our relationship became closer, unfortunately, during the pandemic, because I had the privilege of joining your extraordinary thought leaders mentorship that you launched in 2020 when you moved to New York. In recent years, you have been very active on socials and especially sharing your Changing Minds podcast. I think that you help a lot of people transform the way they think and most importantly, the way they believe. My first question is considering the VUCA world where we are today, and things are getting worse and worse day by day, what are, from your point of view, the biggest challenges that we will need to face in the coming years, both in business but also in our personal life?
So I think that's a great question, Laura. So, and again, thank you so much for the very kind words, about me. We've obviously known each other a few years at this point, and it's great to have gotten to know you over the years. But getting to the question, we live in, as you said, a VUCA world, a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world.
Yeah.
And that world is dominated by the news cycle, which constantly reminds us that whatever you think is happening, it might be something else. It's engineered and designed to be able to keep our attention. And one of the best ways to keep our attention is to highlight all the things that we should be scared about. So a big part of the media and a big part of social media and the traditional media is designed to be able to ensure that we feel uncertain regularly. Why? Because when we feel uncertain, it gives us a desire to look for answers. Where do we go for that desire to look for answers? We go to the media, we go to social media, and usually they don't give us answers, or they give us answers followed by a new thing to be worried about, a new area of uncertainty as well.
Yeah.
And so what we have to realize is that the VUCA world we live in is just happening, right? We're living in a world that there's lots of volatility. If you talk about tariffs, if you talk about the changing in terms of presidential elections or new prime ministers and relationships that are close between countries and then they're not depending on who's there. The economy going up and down and recessions happening here and there and immigration that has polar opposite perspectives about it, as well as lots of other factors. There's so many things happening. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much complexity in the globalized world. There's so many things that we can focus on. And therefore, there's a lot of ambiguity there as well, because people have different points of view or different perspectives around what's going on. So for us to be able to handle it, there's a few things we need to know. The first thing is that we're going to have to face that there's what they call black swan events. These are events that come out of the blue and have huge
Yeah.
implications upon the world. And this is coined by Nassim Nicholas Taleb in his book, The Black Swan. And the idea is, I think it was like in the 18th century or so, there was an understanding that swans were white. And then they came across, I think in Australia, they came across a black swan, and that transformed the way people thought about swans. Well, the reality is we've got lots of black swan events that have occurred. There's, the 2008 worldwide economic recession. There's the COVID. Even back, there was 9/11. And you might argue, well, 9/11 was a huge event for the States, but it actually also affected air travel quite significantly as well. So it did affect a lot of folks right the way through the world. And so when we look at the events that occur as a result of a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, one of the things we have to notice is that there is that uncertainty that comes about with regards to these big events. And the problem is we can't really predict it. Like some people
Yeah.
predicted it, but the majority of people don't. So with those kind of events, we need to be flexible. We need to be agile. We need to be able to be as elastic as possible in our mentality. So we adapt the best way we possibly can. But then there's other events that we know are going to happen, we just don't know when, like recessions, for instance. And these are what we call white swan events. These are events that we know they're going to happen, but we can't be sure exactly when. And then there's the events that we know what are going to happen and we know when they're going to happen. We can call them duck events just because we may as well stick with the metaphor of swans, right? So they're duck events, right? So we know when they're going to happen and we know what they're going to do for us. So what we need to do is we need to be ready for all three. We need to be ready for the duck events. We need to learn to be able to duck, if you'll excuse the pun. We need to be able to be ready for the white swan events when they come along. And then for the black swan events, we just need to cultivate and build a bit of cognitive flexibility where we're more flexible and more adaptive. It's easier for it to change, just like we had to with COVID, just like we had to during the recession. And the other thing is to remind ourselves that we've been through the challenges before, right? So it's when you're dealing with uncertainty, when you're dealing with big challenges, well, you've been through them before. So this should remind you of what I call change confidence. Being confident in the fact that you've gotten through change before, therefore you can do it again. And the more
Yeah.
we can start to align ourselves with these kind of mentalities and mindsets, the more easy it'll be for us to deal with the black swan, the white swan, the ducks. The more easy it'll be for us to be able to handle them effectively and cope with them in the best way possible. Now, by the way, if you go looking for black swan or white swan events in the literature, you'll probably find examples. You won't find any examples of a duck event. It's probably a terrible metaphor. But
Yeah.
I wanted to stay in the nice pond because wherever you find swans, usually you find ducks. I don't even know if that's true, but sure, look.
Okay, interesting. And for this reason, and for the reason that the world is changing continuously, and people are often complaining about their lives, and they are complaining about jobs or relationships, or simply just for the things they are going through. And there is one key point, in my opinion, that you can sense people seeking change for a long time. They've been seeking something different in their lives. But the issue that I see is that even if you know what you need to do in order to make a change in your life, even if you know what are the actions that you should take, sticking with that first step is really, really difficult. Why is so difficult to start to change something in our lives?
I think it's largely a lot of times what you're talking about there, Lars, is referred to as the intention action gap, right? There's a gap between the intention of what we want to do and actually taking the action.
Yeah.
And sometimes we explore the gap is created by what we call self-sabotage. So we sabotage ourselves by procrastinating sometimes, or being distracted, or finding all the other alternatives, or hesitating, and sometimes doing the exact opposite to what we know we should do. Now, what I've been really interested in over the last 25, 30 years of my entire career is looking at what people believe. And a belief is an idea that we feel certain about. And that word feel is the most important word in the sentence. So the feelings that we have about particular ideas determine whether or not they'll be beliefs. Now, the reason I bring beliefs in here is because so often the reason we believe what we do is the same reason why we hold ourselves back or we sabotage ourselves. And it's because our brains are not optimizing for success. Our brains are optimizing for survival. So our
Yeah.
brains are looking to be able to survive. They have certain needs in order to survive. The need for safety, obviously, the need for a sense of certainty. So we need to have a sense of certainty. We need stability. We need efficiency. And so what I mean by stability and efficiency is the brain likes when it can predict things, and it likes when things go the same way they've always gone. The brain likes when things are as easy as possible. The brain uses a lot of energy. It uses like 25% or so, 20 to 25% of the calories that we take in on an everyday basis. So it tries to streamline its actions. And so it reduces the amount of effort and energy it puts in at any opportunity it gets. So the brain is trying to optimize for efficiency. It's trying to be as lazy as possible. And it's also optimizing for safety. So it's avoiding anything that might be risky. And then it's also trying to make it so that it is predictable as possible and stable. So it's looking to do what it did before. And so with that in mind, even though consciously you might say, oh, I really want to lose weight. Consciously you might say, oh, I really want to get up early. Consciously you might say, oh, I really want to stop being obsessed with my phone. Consciously you have all these things that you want. But unconsciously, the normal patterns in terms of what your brain is optimized for is not to give you a better life. It's to keep you alive. And therefore, it's trying to keep you stable, it's trying to keep you certain, and it's trying to keep you in a position where you do not rock the boat too much. And so what
Yeah.
happens then invariably is this intention action gap that is created, it's hard to close that gap because your brain at some level doesn't want to. And so what it will do then is it doesn't just, feel bad about the fact that we haven't taken the action. We then have to justify the decision that we've made. And just like we cultivate and build beliefs out of the stories we sell to ourselves, we sell ourselves stories to explain away why we're hesitating, why we're procrastinating, why we're avoiding that particular behavior. So we say, oh, well, the reason why I couldn't do it is because of this, and we find an excuse. We always look for ways to rationalize our behavior or lack of behavior. And that keeps us grounded because then we can formulate our identity to go, oh, I know I could do this, but there's just not enough time. I know I could do this, but I just don't have enough energy. I know I could do this, but it's my family, but it's the government, but it's the economy. And so these stories that we sell to ourselves are the very things that hold us back and are the very things that lead to this gap between intention and action, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So the sequence is stories, beliefs, and identity in practice. The
Yeah.
sequencing.
So it's like, well, all three of them. So your beliefs are ideas you feel certain about. So your identity is a set of beliefs that you have about yourself. And
Yeah.
I believe that every belief is a story, and every story is pretty much foundation of a belief. Because if you tell me your beliefs, what you're telling me is the story of what you believe about something. So in other words, once upon a time, you're a baby, and your mother, when you cry, your mother comes over and takes care of you. That's a belief. I believe if I cry, I will get attention. But it's
Yeah.
also the story you're telling yourself about that, right? So you're telling yourself a story about what's going to happen. And our brain makes constant predictions. And every prediction is a guess or a story we're telling ourselves, a hypothesis, and a story that we're testing to see whether or not it's true. And so I wouldn't really say chronologically it's this, then this, then this. I would say your brain naturally comes up with lots of different stories. And the ones that you effectively sell to yourself are the beliefs that you buy into. So You know, you have lots of plausible reactions. Like call Loris, Loris doesn't call me back, right? What is my belief about that? Well, one option might be Loris is too busy. Another option might be Loris hates me. Another option might be Loris didn't see the call, right? So there's more than that, but let's say there's those three stories.
Hmm.
Whichever one I buy into, whichever one I sell effectively to myself, let's imagine I say Loris hates me. Now all of a sudden I've sold that belief to myself, and therefore it's a belief rather than just a story. But I have the different plausible stories, and I select one of them, and that one is not just selected based on evidence, it's also based on how I feel. So if I feel
Yeah.
low self-esteem at that moment and Loris doesn't call me back, automatically the belief I build, the story I buy into, is the one that Loris doesn't like me. Whereas if I'm feeling great about myself and I'm like, oh, I'm the best in the world, and then you ask me, why didn't Loris call you back? My belief is because he didn't see the message yet. So we formulate our identity with the stories we sell to ourselves about who we are. We
Yeah.
formulate our beliefs with the stories that we sell to ourselves about what the world is like and what's going on around us. And that's how we construct reality. And back to the intention action gap, the problem is the stories that we sell to ourselves are not always stories that will get us to take the actions that we need
Yeah.
to. Sometimes they're the very things that will distract us or hold us back.
Yeah. And you just anticipated one question that I had for you, because you talk about the stories that we tell ourselves so often in your Changing Minds podcast, and in all your speeches or all your, let me say, social also posts, there is often this reference to stories. And my question at this point is there a specific mindset that we should cultivate, we should make, let me say, more powerful inside us in order to overcome the issue of stories and start taking action in order to pursue the achievements that you want to get in our life?
For sure. So, fundamentally, we're going to sell ourselves stories no matter what. So, what I noticed as a therapist, so I worked as a therapist for many years, and one of the things I noticed was almost everyone that came into me to get my help either came in with one of two mindsets. They either had what I call the victim mindset, and this is the mindset whereby you believe the reason for your problems is because of your family, because of your partner, because of your children, because of the government, because of the economy, because of your past. You were a victim of your circumstances. But then the other story that I heard was the villain story, which is I'm my own worst enemy. I ruin everything. I'm not good enough. I'm a loser. I'm this. I sabotage everything. I'll never succeed. What both of them had in common is both of them were actually victims. One was a victim of the world, the other was a victim of themselves. And the most important job that I had as a therapist was not to be able to just, talk about their problems or challenges or whatnot. It was to help them to change the story they're selling to themselves. So instead of selling the story, I'm a victim of this, therefore I can abdicate responsibility and just feel victimized, which kind of makes us feel good in some ways. When we feel a poor me, there's
Mhm.
like an addictive quality to poor me. It's like, oh, it's just me against the world. It's almost like a bit of self-love that is misdirected by this, non-useful sort of mindset. But the job that I had was to get both of them to realize that they need to focus on what they can control. And so, what I call the hero's mindset is the mindset we have whenever we're focusing on what we can control or at least what we can influence. And the difference between a hero and a victim, I mean, if you look at almost any story, any like superhero story or any normal story of a protagonist, there's generally they follow the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is once upon a time there was this person and their life was okay, and then something bad happened and their not life was knocked out of balance, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden they were impacted by the world. Now they could also be they were impacted by their own mental health or their own inner demons, right? But ultimately something impacted them, and to a degree it victimized them. They became a victim.
Yeah.
Then they pursued this journey where they learned whatever they could learn. They learned from the guide. They got the tools and resources and skills they needed to overcome the challenge or the monster that they faced, and they were able to live happily or ever after. So once again, and even if you look at things like Lord of the Rings, in Lord of the Rings, the typical Frodo thing is, Well, there's the first thing that you see that Frodo's dealing with was he brings the ring to the mountain or the fire, whatever it is that he deals with the physical people, the dark forces that are attacking. But it's
Yeah,
also his own temptation to the ring and the dark side of the negative perspective. It's the same thing in terms of the dark side in terms of Star Wars, right? Even in Star Wars, it's not just the external lightsaber battles or Star Wars themselves. It's also the lull of the dark side, right? And it's kind of symbolic of the fact that the things that get in our way are usually internal and external.
yeah,
But the thing that we need to do first of all in handling both internal and external is to create this agency mindset, this control mindset, which focuses on us, what agency we have, what control we have, what influence we have, because we sometimes can't control everything perfectly, but we can influence them. And so when you do that, when you start to look at what is the agency that I can have over my circumstances, that can be transformational because then
mm,
you start to tell a new story. And the story starts the same way. I'm the victim, but then you take control, you focus on what you can influence, and then you turn things around. The story starts in the same way. I'm the villain, I ruin everything, but then I make a new choice to focus on what I can control and I influence things differently. So, to me, the most important mindset we can get those people who are struggling with situations to be able to adopt is to sell themselves a story that they can be the hero. And the only thing
yeah.
that's a differentiator between the hero and a villain or victim is control, focusing on what you can do, what you can influence.
What you can influence. Great, great answer. And considering that you are also an expert in neuroscience, um, is there any new discovery in neuroscience that can help people change their mindset and break free from procrastination, or even more important, from these limiting beliefs? Is there something that we should know about neuroscience discoveries about that?
Well, there's been an awful lot of great insights over the last 30 years or so in the field of the brain, right? The obvious one is obviously neuroplasticity, and this is your brain's capacity to be able to grow new connections. So, strictly speaking, what we need to understand about the brain comes down to the fact that the brain can change. And neuroplasticity is that the brain can change connections. In other words, we can learn new things. We can learn new things. You can actually teach an old dog new tricks. The difference is after about age 25 or so, more so in the 20s, up to that point, it's quite passive. In other words, we're naturally making the connections. After that, we do it deliberately, right? So when we focus and concentrate and really work hard at learning, we can make those connections as well. So that's one of the biggest and most important elements.
Yeah,
We also have to look, there's a lot of research and insight about the power of dopamine in terms of dopamine and how it helps us to be able to not only feel motivated because it's the anticipated anticipation of reward that benefits us, but also it's been shown to play a big part in terms of our learning and for our ability to retain information. And there's what we call phasic and tonic dopamine, where, on the one hand, you could have like a certain amount of dopamine, the levels that are released into your brain might determine how motivated you are overall. But whenever you experience, let's say, a learning or a lesson, what they call reward prediction error, all of a sudden you realize something is not the way you expected it. Your brain releases a sort of a phase of a massive burst of dopamine that kind of makes it easier for you to be able to remember that information. And then there's other things like acetylcholine, which is really about organizing your focus effectively. There's noradrenaline, which gives you a requisite amount of mental energy, helps you more likely to remember information, just similar to
yeah,
dopamine. So there's a lot of chemicals, there's a lot of things at play. But I would say one of the most important things to understand is the work of Professor Lisa Feldman Barrett. And what Professor Barrett has done is she's looked at emotions and found that the way we think about emotions, that emotions work, the way we think that emotions work, don't work that way at all. And so her thesis basically is she looks and has found in hundreds of studies that emotions are constructed. In other words, it's not that you experience the world and then you react emotionally to it. And it's not even that you've got an emotional brain and a logical brain, and the emotional brain hijacks
yeah,
the logical brain, which is something I was teaching for years and something I believed for years. But what Professor Barrett talks about, and she's written a couple of excellent books, How Emotions Are Made and 7.5 Lessons
mm,
about the Brain. But What Professor Barrett theory is all about is it says that your brain is ultimately speaking, and we know this from perception theory, but your brain's a prediction machine, but not just in terms of perception, it also predicts in terms of emotion. So your brain basically takes in information from three sources. It takes in information from the world through your senses. It takes in information in terms of through your body, through what we call interoception, a part of the brain
Hmm.
that's usually
Yeah.
responsible for this is the insula. And what happens is it scans our body, scans the environment, and then goes to the concepts or memories or lessons or learnings we have. And based upon those three input sources, it builds and constructs what it thinks is going on. So our bodies react in a certain way, and our brains then will label that reaction based upon the context we find ourselves in. So if you're running away from a lion or you're running in a very fast race, you're going through two totally different experiences. One of them is going to feel like fear, and one's going to feel like fun or enjoyment or excitement, even though you're physically doing the same thing and the same kind of emotions are going through your body because of the way in which your body or your brain interprets that. And why this is relevant or useful for us is because we need to start to recognize that the physical quality of our body, in other words, the nutrition we get, how relaxed we can be, the fact that we take rests, how good our sleep is, how much exercise and movement we get. Those are all factors that will not just impact your physical health, they'll impact your emotional health in significant ways because they affect what Professor Barrett calls your body budget. And your body budget is really the brain's running a budget of giving your body what it needs on an ongoing basis. And whenever you feel bad or different types of negative feelings, your body budget is in deficit. Whenever you feel good, your body budget is in surplus. And once again, that metaphor, it's only a metaphor, but the metaphor helps us to be able to be better equipped to change our own emotions and motivate ourselves more effectively and take the actions that we need to. So again, just to sort of summarize, I think neuroplasticity is huge in reminding
Yeah.
us that we have the ability to change. It's aligned very much with the growth mindset of Professor Carl Dweck, which is that we can grow and improve. Um, Second of all, the neurochemicals, especially dopamine, for example, we've learned a lot about how that works and how we can generate more dopamine. And then also, finally, Lisa Feldman Barrett's wonderful work on the constructivist theory of the brain is also really handy and helpful to know. And again, very counterintuitive. It's like, it doesn't feel like it's true, but yet all the data backs it up.
Great information. And we have no more excuses, let me say, with the neuroplasticity and all this stuff that neuroscience is giving to us. So let me ask this question. Suppose that we embrace change. So we embrace the hero mindset and neuroplasticity and all the things that you mentioned just before. And we build a very strong personal brand. We build a new version of ourselves that is very impactful, and we improve our communication, our, let me say, interpersonal skills as well. My question is, how about the others? I mean, uh, we can change, but my perception is that if we don't change also, let me say, the surroundings and the environment, maybe we could end up just being a futile, let me say, effort, the change that we can make on ourselves. What do you think about the others?
So I think ultimately speaking that the people you surround yourself with does play a part in determining, first of all, how easy it is for you to make changes and keep changes. So, for instance, if you always overeat and you literally eat Chinese food all the time, and so does your partner, and so do your kids, and so do all your friends, and they're like stubbornly only wanting to eat Chinese food.
Mhm.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Chinese food, by the way. Chinese food is great, but I'm saying
Yeah,
unhealthy food, right? I'm saying just in terms of
yeah,
any type of food, you're just doing it. If you want to make the change, one of the things you need to do is you need to recognize that it's going to be harder for you to decide, oh, I'm going to have a different type of food. I'm going to have, Italian. I'm going to have Greek food. I'm going to have Irish food. I'm going to have whatever food. It's going to be hard for you to change that if everyone else is still doing the same thing. So what needs to happen then is we need to be able to recognize that it influences, but still not put ourselves into the victim mindset. Because the problem is, Lars, as soon as we start to think, oh, well, look, it doesn't matter how hard I try, I'm still surrounded by the same kind of people. Because that is the victim mindset. That is the story we're selling to
Hmm.
ourselves about that. And so we can do a two-pronged approach. On the one hand, we tell ourselves a new story. We start to act in different ways. We look to do different things. We start to try to do the kinds of things that we need to do. And then in doing so, we try to inspire the people around us. We try to reach out and explore and get new experiences and new concepts. Because fundamentally, that's what our brain needs. It needs new memories that we can start to put in there so that we can start to, again, feel that the newness is stable, right? We're acting in a stable way, consistent with the new person that we are. And so when we're able to focus on what we can change externally, but also what we're already changing internally, then it becomes a different question. And that is, what progress are we making, as opposed to what's the point, which can be so easy. A lot of the great work you do, Lars, as an expert in personal branding, is that you
Yeah.
help people to be able to transform the way in which they think about themselves, and you help them to transform the way in which they show up. So recognizing the importance of showing up with a level of confidence, positioning themselves with the kind of characteristics that they want other people to perceive them as having. And when they do that, sometimes the people that have known them for a while are going to see them as their old self. So it doesn't matter if you're demonstrating this new side of you, they will still, in their mind, still be trying to make you fit their preordained way of
Yeah.
thinking. So
Yeah.
your goal is to be consistent with that and to make it so that you are consistent enough that eventually they change. So recognizing that they might still see you that way. So, you're killing it in work, everything's going great, and then you go back to your family and there's the same old pattern there.
Yeah.
But what you do is you act still in the new way. You're still, wonderful with them, but you act in the new way. And even when they try to bring you down or try to have smart comments or whatever, you're joking it rolls off your back, you don't mind, but you keep acting in that way. And over time, they start to formulate a new reputation in their mind. They start to perceive you more with the personal brand. But again, you shouldn't, you know, give up just because the world around you isn't changing as fast as you
Yeah.
want it to. You don't take responsibility for that. You take responsibility for what you can do.
Yeah. Sure. Great. Great. And you mentioned personal brand, and as you know, this podcast is titled "Be Your Brand," and I'm working on personal branding because I met a lot of people, a lot of customers that are struggling with their careers or their personal lives, and not because they have not the skills or the ability or the knowledge, the experience, or they are not pleasant or nice people, but just because they fall into the imposter syndrome or they lack confidence and so on. So I strongly believe that personal branding today, even more than in the past, is a powerful way to change the way you behave and the way you come across to people and the way you get results and success in your life. And my question is, what's your perspective on personal branding, especially in this world that is moving towards an artificial intelligence driven world? So, personal branding is your authenticity, and can we stay relevant in front of the world if we work on our personal brand?
So I would go even further. I would say that first of all, we all have a personal brand, whether we do anything about it or not, whether we like it or not. We all have a personal brand. To me, when you work with folks and you help them to build a great personal brand, you're helping them move from one type of personal brand to another because
Genau.
ultimately we all engage with people, we all interact with people, we all have
Yeah,
conversations with people, and people walk away from us and have an impression in their mind about who we are. And so our goals and your goal when you work with folks in terms of personal branding is your goal is to ensure that the people that they interact with walk away with the kind of impression they want. That's the ultimate goal in branding is you want
yeah,
people to have a feeling and have a belief and a thought about you that is something that you've planted not by a word that you've used, but by the way you show up, by the way in which you communicate, by the way in which you interact with them. So we all have personal brandings. We can't escape
yeah,
it. And so then that begs the question, well, how important our personal brand is a personal brand given the AI revolution? Well, the reality is AI is here. It's transforming the world. It's going to continue to bring lots more change. But ultimately speaking, we can leverage AI and use AI to bring more of our own authenticity. So some people turn around and go, your personal brand is your advantage when it comes to the AI world. And that's a fair enough statement, but I have a slightly more nuanced perspective of it. I believe that it's not a case of your personal brand means that you're better than AI because a lot of AI stuff can be generic. I believe that AI can help you to develop your personal brand more effectively. So if you
Hmm.
give AI lots of information, it can actually start to communicate like you. It can start to think like you. It can start to approach problems in the same way you would, ask the questions that you would. So AI has the potential for you to understand yourself better because
Yeah.
it stores so much information about you. And a great prompt to type in is to go, to ChatGPT, let's say, or Gemini, whatever you use. If you've used it for a while, say, what are some things that I might not know about myself that you can tell me about me based upon the interactions we've had together? And just asking something like that means that AI gives you its sort of logical reasoning based upon all the conversations that you've had with it so far, right? And
Yeah.
it can help you to start to build your self-awareness. And as you well know and teach, self-awareness is a very important part of your personal brand. Because if you're not aware of how you're coming across now, how can you move to come across in the way you want to, right? So to me, AI is a wonderful tool to help us to understand ourselves better, to help us to be able to be ourselves more, to be
Hmm.
more authentic, and I think the mistake we make is we kind of see it as like it's us against AI, it's human versus AI. I think it's more augmented than that. I think we are naturally going to, move that way. The same
Yeah.
way that if a person
Interact.
thinks about themselves, part of their, description is going to involve what they do, right? Part of their description is going to involve, potentially their social media profile. So
Yeah.
we are now in a world where your personal brand incorporates your interaction and engagement with AI. And so the key is to learn how we can use AI to understand ourselves more and to be able to communicate authentically, right? Because ultimately, I don't believe that artificial intelligence is something separate to us. I think it's part of us. Just because when you engage with it, you are engaging with something that is learning about you and understanding you, and therefore able to replicate, something similar to you. There's people that have avatars on AI now, which can talk like them and sound like them and look like them, and the
Yeah.
information coming out seems like them. So that begs the question: what is authentic? And authentic is you bringing in your personality more, sharing your sense of humor more, sharing, the side of you that is uh, that could only be, Lars, that could only be Owen. And
Yeah.
as long as you're working on that, I think you've got nothing to fear from AI.
Yeah. Very interesting. And we should become alive with AI and become even better than what we are today.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. And I have a more interesting question about what you are doing, if you can answer, because I know you are working on a new book, and I would like to ask you to share, if you can, some preview of this new book and what we should expect in your next book that you are publishing soon.
So, so this is my 10th book, but it's the most important book
Yeah.
I've ever worked on. It's called Inner Propaganda, and
Hmm?
it's really about understanding why we believe what we believe. In other words, how do we influence ourselves? So often we hear the word propaganda and it's about, how we're influenced by the media and social media and whatnot, but we have the very same devices in our own mind. And when I started earlier and we started this conversation, I talked about the different needs our brain has. And because of those needs, our brain optimizes for a sense of certainty, for a sense of stability, for a sense of safety, and does so in order to be able to protect us. But in
Yeah.
doing so, it finds ways, it's able to distort the world such that we build beliefs through what feels right, then we make sense of it, and then it needs to fit in. So those three elements are how we build beliefs. First, it needs to feel right, then it needs to make sense, then it needs to fit in. And the problem is, most of the time when we try to change our own beliefs or change someone else's beliefs, we fall into the trap of just trying to make it make sense. So if I want to convince Lars of something, I need to give him all the evidence. And if I give him enough evidence, Lars will change his mind. Well, we simply know that just isn't so. In
Yeah.
most of the cases, if we want to have a chance of persuading people, of changing minds, and the stakes are high in this world because we are living in a world of what I call belief leaders, where people are not just thought leaders, they're not just throwing out ideas, they are transforming the way in which we see the world. They're able to tell powerful stories that interpret things. And if you talk about the most popular politicians on the planet, that's what they're masters of. They're masters of curating and cultivating a reality that they're able to show to their followers. We need to learn these skills. And I
Yeah.
believe that's why Inner Propaganda to me is the most important book that I've ever written because it's shining a light at what I've been studying for 30 years. I've traveled to North Korea. I've traveled to Afghanistan. I've traveled to Rwanda, researching, talking, interviewing with people. I've worked with thousands of people, thousands of clients with problems from depression, anxiety, working on changing beliefs. I've studied, ex-cult members. I've studied strategic negotiation at Harvard and digital persuasion in terms of MIT and brought all of this together. I even got coached by the former media coach to Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. And all of this is just to say that I've been obsessed with trying to understand why we believe what we believe and
Mhm.
how we can change this, how we can change our own beliefs and how we can change the beliefs of others to be able to help them to believe more in themselves and to be able to help them to believe in ideas worth believing in. So to me, my goal is to help more people become what I call belief leaders. And that is through understanding in a propaganda how our beliefs are made based upon what feels right, what makes sense, and what fits in. And there's lots of great stories in it. We go into, World War II, right the way through back in time to different revolutionaries. We talk about conspiracy theories and cults. We've lots of stories from my own experience and working with clients, my experience in terms of in North Korea, Afghanistan. There's so much in there that I'm packing in because I truly want this to transform the lives of everyone else. This is my big book, the one that I
Your
want
big book.
everyone to hear of.
It
So
would
I'm
be
really
a great success for sure, from what
excited.
I heard now. So I'm waiting for this book
It'll be out next summer. So
next
uh,
summer.
bit
Perfect.
of a wait, 2026, but I'm hoping it'll be worth waiting for. So yeah.
Okay. So we are going towards the closure, and I just ask you the last question. Just let me say a short message, a takeaway that you want to give to the audience, to the people that are listening to us, what you think are relevant, useful to them.
What I'd like to say is that the stories that we sell to ourselves become the beliefs that we buy into. So recognize that whatever you think is true, if you believe that you can't succeed, if you believe that you'll never overcome this problem that you're facing, if you believe things will always be unfair, if you believe that you're trapped or stuck, if you believe there's no way you can get through to this person, if you believe that there's no hope, remember it's only a story. And the stories that you sell to yourself become the beliefs you buy into. So recognize it's a story and choose to tell yourself and sell to yourself a different story. When you do that, you can accomplish so much more than you might imagine is possible.
Great, great message, and I hope that all your insights today will inspire people to think about where they are and where they want to be, and they could find the motivation to take action, to change, and find a way to live a successful life. That means to live the life that they want to live. So I will put your contacts in the short note of the podcast episode, and people can reach you through your podcast, Changing Minds podcast, and your fantastic newsletter that is in a propaganda. That is the same title of your book.
That's right. So
And
it's owenfitzpatrick.com/newsletter if
owenfitzpatrick.com.
anyone wants it. And then the
Yeah,
Changing Minds, you can find that on YouTube or Spotify or
yeah.
iTunes. But I want to say thank you also to you, Loris. It's great to have you on. It's great to have known you all these years. And I think the work that you're doing around personal branding is fantastic. And
Thank
I
you.
highly recommend anyone out there that's listening in that's looking to be able to improve their personal brand or get their teams working more effectively. Loris is your man.
Thank you so much. I thank you very much, Owen, for your kindness and the knowledge that you share with us today. And obviously, because you are a great mentor. Thank you very much again. And for the audience, let's see you in the next episode. And remember, be always your brand. Hai ascoltato Be Your Brand Podcast. Condividilo con chi vuoi e iscriviti. E non dimenticare, be always your brand.